Hello and welcome. I'm Erin Cuthbert, footballer for Chelsea and the Scotland national team, and you're listening to the Blue Day podcast.
Fellow Chelsea supporters, we have a truly special episode of the podcast today. An old friend of the show returns as he has a special announcement to make in terms of what's being planned for the future. He made 164 appearances for Chelsea Football Club across two spells, and we are going to talk about those in detail today. Welcome back to Steve Wicks. Steve, welcome back. How are we?
Yeah, I'm all right, Keith. How are you?
I'm very
You good?
good. I'm very good. Enjoying the sunshine. It's lovely to have you on the show again today, but there is a particular reason why we've got you on the show. Talk to us about this sort of mini announcement that you've got in terms of a correlation project that you're doing with a certain Harry Harris.
Yeah, we've I've written a book called Nothing But the Truth, and it's a book about my time at Chelsea, especially the first spell, really. Um, and I wanted to give the players that I had the pleasure and honour of playing alongside a tribute, um, and uh, and also, a big part of that is Ray Wilkins, and I wanted people to know him and how good he was. We all knew the influence he had when he was older, but the influence he had when he was younger was incredible for such a young man. He led by example. He was a lovely human being and a fantastic footballer. But I wanted to do a tribute to that squad because I think what we achieved sometimes goes under the radar. And what really made me think about writing this book all those years ago was when we had the centenary dinner, Chelsea's centenary dinner. The only person from that squad that was invited was Ray because he worked on the staff. He was the coach, and someone told Roman the story. And 4 weeks later, Roman put on this unbelievable lunch at the Dorchester and paid tribute to the team, and he couldn't believe the story that was told. And he said, sorry, we didn't invite you. We should have invited you because, if it had gone the other way, God forbid, who knows what, might have happened to Chelsea Football Club.
Now, before we delve into the book itself, and obviously we've talked about your time, for those that are not aware, Steve has been on the show on numerous occasions. He was a fabulous co-host, and we also did one of the player interviews, which you can find on our archives, and it was very, very in depth in terms of your time. And you mentioned a lot of stories about certain players like John Dempsey, how much of an influence he was with
Yeah,
you, Ray Wilkins. You spoke of just off the record just now about Teddy Maybank and also John Holland. But I remember when we was sort of talking sort of away from the podcast, and you said to me years ago, Keith, if I ever wrote a book, people will be aghast because of the stories that I will tell. And I said, okay, that'll be interesting. And then when I heard from our mutual friend Harry Harris that his new project was correlating with you writing your book, I smiled because I'm like, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a very good book to read. So the book will be out soon. Obviously, release date is not confirmed yet, but also we're going to talk about a potential meet and greet that's coming up as well next month that we'll talk about later at the end of the show, Steve. But in terms of the actual book
yeah,
itself, you talked about your time, um, coming through the ranks at Chelsea, but also even before deciding to join Chelsea. And there was one extract that I saw from the book that I don't ever believe you actually mentioned it to me that you was actually close to signing for Leeds United.
well,
How
I think
how
my
did that
dad was.
happen?
No, funny enough, we Berkshire boys, we played in the game, and both Eddie Heath and the Leeds guy called Wally Mell approached me at the same time, and wanted my address and wanted to know where I lived and were my parents here. And my mum and dad ended up speaking to both Leeds United and Chelsea. Trust me when I say this. There was only one club I was ever going to sign for, because Chelsea were my favourite team. But it got a little bit complicated because Leeds never took no for an answer, and they turned up knocking on my door at my house. And in those days, I think my mum and dad's house was £4,999,
Wow.
and they put a cheque on the table for £10,000. And my dad nearly died. I think he'd have gone out and got, bought a white shirt if he possibly could. But my mum was dead against it. She said we couldn't give him the support. She couldn't see me surviving in Leeds. She was a typical mum. And she insisted, and I insisted, that I'd sign for Chelsea. For no money, by the way. Not for one penny.
And that story that I know you mentioned it to me, but for those that perhaps haven't listened to the previous episodes, the day you did sign for Chelsea, am I right in saying that your
Yeah,
dad was a little bit trepidatious with it?
yeah. My dad was. He'd already spent the money. My dad. He paid off the house, and you know. Yeah. No. He was fine. He was fine. It's just, we weren't a wealthy family. We both mum and dad worked, and they grafted hard, and it was a lot of money. And also, let's be fair about it. Leeds at the time were probably the number one club in the country.
Because they had Don
Um,
Revie in charge, am I right in saying? He was the
yeah,
manager at the time, yeah.
yeah. He was the manager, and they were different class as a team. It's funny enough, both Leeds and Chelsea got into the cup final that year. Sorry,
1970, yeah.
got in the cup final, and that's when Leeds were probably the best team in the league. And they played bloody well in that first game, especially, and we were a bit fortunate. But no, I one of the things that I wanted to do, I knew Ray Lou, I knew Teddy, playing against them, and it's funny at that level, the reputations of players go around the dressing room, and the thought of having Ray Wilkins, who everyone at that time, he was head and shoulders probably the best young player in the country, and the thought of playing with him and Ray Lou and Teddy Maybank, and it was exciting from my perspective. I knew the boys, I knew their reputations. I didn't know anyone from Leeds. I had no idea. So that was what appealed to me.
And when it came down to signing for Chelsea, and then you ended up training at Stamford Bridge, I believe, twice a week, wasn't it? You was training at
Yeah,
Stamford
Tuesday
Bridge
and
in your
Thursday.
early days, yeah. You also had sort of learning through the first teamers as well. What was that like for you to sort of engage with the elder statesmen, so to speak, of that squad quite early on?
Well, they were legends, weren't they? They were real legends. Ozzy, Alan Hudson, Hutch, Holly. It was all very special players, and sometimes as a kid you had to pinch yourself to say, "Am I really in amongst these people?" And then when Ron Harris gave you a kick, you really did know you were with, with the people. No, that was a joke. No, it was fantastic. It was a dream come true.
Again, I was going through the book. There was one particular name that was at Chelsea that you sort of gave quite a glowing reference to it. I did want to bring it up. Was Marvin Hinton. What was he like with you
Oh,
from a young age, and obviously with you coming through the ranks and sort of making more and more appearances for Chelsea? What was he like with you?
he was absolutely brilliant with me. I played with him in the reserves, and I've made my debut in the reserves about, I suppose I was about 17,
Hmm.
and he was absolutely brilliant. He taught me through the game. He always looked after me, always gave me advice, and he was a fantastic player. And in those days, what happened, which I think is missing in today's game, is the fact that when you played in the combination as it was, you played against first division players. Like when we played against Arsenal, I marked John Radford, who's an experienced pro, knows all the tricks, and to play against players of that ilk was it just helped you learn the game, and you had experiences you never had before, and it was a brilliant experience. And I think we miss that today in terms of our young players playing against wily Division One, Division Two players, and having that experience. But no, Marvin has always been very special to me, and when I see him, I give him a big cuddle.
It is quite fascinating when you go through the names of the players that, as you say, you either grew up with together in the Chelsea team or when you was playing in the first team. And there's just a couple of names that I just wanted to bring up. You know, Ray Lewington, who people that know their football will know who Ray Lewington is. Tommy Langley, who started off at Chelsea very young and he was there for a number of years. You know, John Hollins, and you talked about Peter Osgood, you talked about Ray Wilkins. The one thing that we've discussed, they're all characters. They're all very good, energetic characters, and I think that we've talked about it in the past, Steve, where in nowadays in football you don't get many of those types of characters anymore. Do those characters help young players develop not just into players but into men?
Um, I think they did, Keith. You know, when there was always a game when the first team were playing a game. What the procedure was that they set the youth team up in the formation of the team they were playing. So once a week we played against the first team,
Hmm.
and weren't a bad side, and we gave them a hard time. Not a hard time physically. We we kept the ball, and it was a fantastic experience from our perspective. Um, but it also helped us learn our game and our play against those type of players. It was incredible. It was incredible, and to do that once a week, it was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
There was one.
Hard sometimes.
Sorry,
Go on.
Steve.
Hard sometimes. They were very physical, and they didn't hold back.
Because I was also what was interesting was that I looked at the book and I didn't realise the amount of players from Chelsea that were actually part of the squad as well. But you've touched on it before with your England adventure, especially in the youth sides when you went to the World Cup.
Yeah.
The amount of players that you would play with alongside at Chelsea went with that England squad as well. That must have been quite.
There's four.
That
Yeah.
that that, that must
There
have been
was
really
four.
good. I was just going to
Yeah.
say that must have been quite good
Yeah.
for
There was.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. We all stuck together. And the one thing about that, where we've known each other for so long, if one of us was having a bad time or not playing how we could do, you'd always have the support from the other players. And to have Tommy, Ray, and Johnny Sparrow in that squad, it was fantastic. Fantastic.
So eh, it's interesting when you talk about obviously with your time at Chelsea, and there are obviously bits in the book where you've got the highs, so such as making your debut, and then you've obviously scoring your first goal. One aspect of you've touched on before was how the fans took to you, and how the fans sort of took you, say, under their wing, so to speak. When you see fans now, do they still, obviously from that generation. Do you still have that sort of feeling of being together with the supporters? Do you still have that sort of closeness with the supporters every time that you go to Chelsea matches?
I think Chelsea, the real Chelsea fans, and when I say the real Chelsea fans, I mean, for me, our fans were absolutely incredible.
Mm.
They were our 13th man. They, as I said to you, Keith, earlier, when the Wolves game will remain with me forever, when we were on a away ban, we had to get a point to get promotion, and we went up to Molineux thinking we're very lonely. This is lonely. We're going to be, there's going to be all these. And we walked out, and all of a sudden, all the blue and white scarves appeared. I don't know how they did it, but our support that day was absolutely incredible. And what it did, it lifted the team. It gave us that boost. And for a long period of that game, we outplayed Wolves. We were the better team. And they equalised with about, I think, 20 minutes to go. Tommy Langley had scored the goal. Yeah, they equalised. But that lift that we had from the fans, and that's how I look at fans of my day. They were passionate, absolutely passionate about. And there are some fans today who are passionate. You only got to see the real fans. I think, and what I love is when I meet people. And I've been to a couple of Harry's book launches where I've met you, saw you there, kid, and the people that arrive at that, they are so passionate about that era. Mm. They are so passionate, and it's lovely to speak to them. It's lovely to speak to them. I understand with social media, it's a nightmare for a player, but we never had that in our day. We had a real, great relationship with the supporters.
One thing, I was going through the later chapters of the book, Steve, and there was one bit that I did hear that whether or not it's true, it obviously remains to be seen, but I did hear certain stories of this, and I wanted to obviously bring this up with you, and it concerns George Best. Now, you mentioned in the book about after 1972 that Chelsea, there was a little bit of a decline with Dave Sexton, and you said that there was a split in the camp. And you mentioned in the book that there was a big drinking culture, which would go on not just with Chelsea, but with all clubs. And you touched on Alan Hudson and Peter Osgood. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I've heard this from a couple of other Chelsea players and also heard it from a couple of other fans and even a journalist. Is it true that there was a potential that George Best could have signed for Chelsea Football Club around that time where Hudson and Peter Osgood was still there? Did you hear anything in terms of that particular rumour?
There was talks about it. The rumours did go a little bit wild but it was a very short space of time.
Right.
And I think Dave would have been against it because George came with a reputation, and what Dave Sexton was trying to do was to sort out Chelsea basically, and because the social side of Chelsea at that time, the players rubbed shoulders with actors, singers, actresses, you name it. They're invited to parties. And you've either got to be, in my opinion, dedicated to the cause, and you've got to do that later in life when you finish playing, or maybe on a Saturday night. But when you start, it becomes a big part of your life, socialising and having a drink and not performing to your best of your ability. What I think that it tells you is the moral honesty of a footballer. You've got your fans. We spoke about our fans, but and they paid, even in those days, lots of money to go and see you play. And if you haven't worked your socks off, or you haven't trained properly, or you're thinking of what you're going to do on the Saturday night, you don't do them justice. And I think that's the way I looked at it, is that I sat down with Tony Curry, one of the finest footballers I've ever ever played with, and he was magnificent footballer. And he was going to sign for Vancouver Whitecaps, and all he said, he used two words that no footballer should ever use: if only. If only I'd have been more dedicated. If only I didn't smoke. If only I didn't drink so much. If only I didn't do that. I reckon I could have got 80 caps. And God gave him an ability that was absolutely sensational. But he retired with regrets. And I don't think you should ever do that as a professional footballer. It's an amazing opportunity. It's a fantastic life. Great friendships. And you've just got to give it your best shot and give it everything. And that's what I think Dave was panicking about. But you had your players that live like that, upset about the other players that weren't living like that. Yeah. And when you consider Chelsea got to 3 cup finals in 3 years, and all of a sudden it started to go down the tubes, and it was a very sad, from a young player's perspective, it was very sad to be in the middle of it and see it happen. Because that team was the 1970 team that won the FA Cup. That was the, fantastic team.
One player that I do need to mention before we sort of touch on to the later parts of the book is Ray Wilkins. Now, you mentioned how influential Ray was, not just as a captain or a player, but as a man himself. For those that perhaps maybe have only seen him, whether it was a coach with even Carlo Ancelotti or Gianluca Vialli, sort of in his later time at the club, what was he like as a player?
He was magnificent. I remember playing against him the first time, and I was playing up front in those days, and I was watching him, and my God, he was hitting passes. He's 15, and he was hitting passes left and right foot, hitting incredible passes forward, and just dictating the game, dictating the whole game. And he was an incredible footballer. He went on to captain England schoolboys, didn't he? And he was absolutely brilliant. But the other one, he was an incredible footballer. And again, I think probably Ray could have signed for any first division club in the country, and he chose Chelsea. And I think the other one that could have done that was John Sparrow. John Sparrow was fantastic left back. And unfortunately, with his career, he got really nasty injuries, which stopped him from going the whole way. But he was a brilliant footballer, John. Brilliant footballer. But Ray Lou, he's another one. I can't speak highly enough of him. If I went into war and I wanted someone on my left or on my right, my first choice would be Ray Lewington, because he never knew when he was beaten. He's gone into tackles where you think, oh dear. And again, not only a great footballer, but a lovely person. And him and Ray, who were Ray Lewington made Ray look good because of the way he won the ball back and gave the ball early to Ray to do his magic with. But as people, you couldn't wish to meet two more incredible people. And even now, and writing the book brought back so many memories. I just can't believe he's not with us anymore. And I find it really, really sad, because what you do is you shake hands with him and you say, "All right, fella." He always had his little, very, very sad that he's not here.
Yeah, I know when I've spoken to former players or former colleagues of Ray, both on the podcast and even at Chelsea events, I haven't heard one bad word about him. Not one.
No,
not one.
There's nothing. And I think that's what the whole squad was about. I think, for instance, we signed Kenny Swain. I think we signed Kenny for, I think it was £12,000. And you're looking at it thinking, what a player he became. You know,
Yeah.
Swaney was what a signing he was. And for him to go, and he just fitted in perfectly because he was very dedicated. He was given a chance that over his dead body was he ever going to not take, and because he came in a little bit later. But he was a great. But Steve finished them. You know, Steve. Everyone says about he scored all those. He scored all those goals, but he worked hard. He worked hard for the team, and there was a general ethic in that team that listen. If we get beaten, this team's going to have to be bloody good because we're going to work our socks off, and that's the way we. You know, the first year we got got relegated. We got absolutely kicked off the park by every team we played. They wanted to intimidate us, kick us, you know, and it was a hard season. That was. But the second year, when we got used to that and we started to give it back, and as you do as you get older, and play our football, sure, we had a bit of everything. And when I watch Ronnie George's, snippets, and you see the goals we scored so many goals on the counter. Our pace, and it's fantastic to see. Fantastic to see.
I want to mention about your departure the first time round, and it's mentioned in the book in great detail. So I won't obviously go into too much about it, because obviously you need, for those that are interested, buy the book. But just talk to us about the feelings that you had about leaving Chelsea and the thought of what you was told by certain individuals about if you did not leave Chelsea. Do you feel, looking back now, all these years later, do you feel that there was so much of a burden on you to make that decision? Because at the end of the day, if you made the decision that the club didn't want, there would have been issues. And it was a case of you had no choice but to make this decision. When you look back on it, do you feel that young Steve Wicks should have maybe had support from the club or somebody else to sort of bounce an idea off of, in terms of what you was being basically told you had to do this, otherwise the club is
Yeah.
in financial problems?
Well, the one thing that I did have, and I've always said this, I call him, and a lot of Chelsea fans might say, well, it's because of him we got in trouble. But as a man and a person, Brian Mears was the best chairman I ever worked for. And the one thing you could always rely on is that he was telling you the truth. And it was heartbreaking that, you know, in many ways he blamed himself for a lot of things. And he was just trying to make Chelsea bigger. He wanted to build a stadium where it was all joined up, and he had great plans for the club. But unfortunately, so what he did was he said, look, would you please make a phone call? And it was to the administrators, Martin Spencer, I'll never forget his name. And he told me that the financial state of Chelsea. He told me what, if I didn't accept the deal, then the existence of Chelsea Football Club is in serious doubt. There's more in the book about, but if I leave it at that, you can read the rest of it, what was said. But so I just said, "Can I have 5 minutes?" And I phoned my wife up, and I agreed to complete the deal. But I was heartbroken. I didn't want to go to Derby. I was heartbroken. It was a really. I remember walking up the Fulham Road with tears, you know, thinking, "My God, you know, I've been here a long time," and it's. But I wasn't the only one. In the book, you'll find out other stories exactly the same, where people didn't want to leave Chelsea. But what was really sad from my perspective was we got up. We did what, you know, when you're told by the chairman, if we don't get promotion in 2 years, the club won't exist anymore. That's what he said. So all those boys had that unbelievable responsibility and pressure as 19-year-olds, and yet we dealt with it and we did it. What was quite upsetting then, instead of being able, as you would do now, to improve that squad of players, for instance, Ron Harris was he was in his 30s. Pete Leslie was in his 30s, coming to the end of their careers. If we could have, not Forest, if we'd have bought Shilton, we'd have bought Archie Gemmell, and we'd have bought Trevor Francis, what would they have been? What would that have made Chelsea as a team? My sad thing about that is we never, ever reached our potential, I think, because when we got to promotion to the first division, all the big teams, we beat Man United at Old Trafford. We beat Liverpool twice, and they were European champions and league champions. We beat them twice.
And one was the FA Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then the big boys, the Clements and the Emlyn Hughes and all that, they had things in match and shoot, and they said it was a complete fluke. It will never happen again. And Liverpool scored with 8 minutes to go 1-0 up, and you thought, bloody hell. And we beat them 3-1. And so, to me, that tells you the potential is there. Yeah. But we were never given the opportunity to show the full potential of that side because we couldn't. Our hands were financially tied, so we couldn't do that. But I would have loved to have seen that because I honestly think that the group of Chelsea players that were still there were better than the not Forest players who, let's be fair about it, we always used to beat. We always used to beat or draw or draw. They never. I can't remember Notts Forest ever beating us in the. And funny enough, when they won the league, the first team to beat them, Chelsea. That's one of my biggest regrets is that we weren't allowed to see our full potential with that group of boys, and I find that really sad.
Another bit on the book that I want to talk about, and this is from you as a Chelsea fan, not just as a player, but you would go on to play for Derby County. What was it like marking Peter Osgood, who returned at this point? He returned to Chelsea, obviously a bit later in his career, but for a Chelsea supporter like yourself, who came from the club and worked his way up and had a very good career up to that point, what was it like for you to mark one of your heroes?
Well, the first time I marked Ozzy, it was at Stamford Bridge when he was at Southampton. And I used the phrase, it was like marking God in his very own heaven, because all you heard was the Chelsea fans singing for Pete Osgood, born as the King of Stamford Bridge. It was. He tried to intimidate me a little bit in the first 10, 15 minutes. So I thought, I'm not getting involved. But it was an honour. It was an honour to play against Ozzy. He was, he's another one of those players that should have played for England so many more times. I'm maybe slightly biased, but Martin Chivers or Peter Osgood, I'd have Peter Osgood every day of the week.
Really?
But great experience. But I think we drew 1-1. It was a good game, big crowd.
There is bits of the book as well that you touch on your experience with QPR, and we've talked about Terry Venables at length, either both on the show and also face to face. But there is bits of the book about Terry Venables as well, which I recommend people obviously talk about because Terry was a big influence with you as well.
Well, I think he's an influence on everyone that's ever played for him. It was like going to school. You learn something new every day. His man management skills were unbelievable. If he got beaten, you thought you let him down. You didn't think yourself because his preparation from Monday to Friday was unbelievably professional in every way. And we went on that pitch knowing more about them than they knew about us. Mm. And I remember, I suppose it's the one thing that I think if I could have given anything to Gareth Southgate to make him a winner for England and win a couple of things, is that we'd be getting beaten 1-0. And Terry would come in and he always said, if he makes changes, it's not personal, it's for the good of the team. And he'd go, right, you come there, you do that, you do this, you set it all out. And the amount of games we come in winning 3-1 after his half-time talk and changing the course of the game, he was unbelievable. And I wish, part of being what I consider a fantastic coach, which Terry was he was so proactive. He was never reactive. He would make the changes that would, as soon as he could, he'd make those changes and he'd do it. And I think he's been so unlucky. We all say what a great, man he is. We forget sometimes, he lost on penalties the European Cup.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he lost on penalties when we were far the better side against Germany. I don't care what anyone says. He lost by penalties. And Terry should have been, a real god in this, in the world of coaches. But
absolutely,
everyone that works absolutely says the same thing. Great man.
Suffice to
loss.
Oh, massively. I mean, I remember when. Probably going to touch on a little bit personal, but I remember when the news broke and we spoke when we both heard about Terry. We spoke on the evening, and we was touching it for about a good 2 hours, weren't we? To be fair, it was nice, obviously, to go through the stories and everything. But it was interesting. I've touched on the book as well. There was one bit of it that you did talk about the time when you went back to Chelsea. Again, not going to talk about it too much because, again, buy the book when it comes out. But there was a quote in the book which caught my attention when I saw it this morning. I walked into a civil war at Chelsea. The club was in complete disarray. Again, in terms of the ramifications and when you came back and how much it changed, don't have to go into detail because, again, buy the book, but just as a sum up thing, how bad was it? And is there bits in the book where people would be maybe surprised, shocked about certain individuals' behaviours or certain individuals' attitudes? And we're not just talking about players as well. We're talking about other individuals.
Oh yeah. Well, I think I use the phrase there was more clicks in that dressing room than there was on the Stamford Bridge turnstile. It was I'd come from a club with a magnificent team spirit and togetherness. I walked into, they'd had a good season the season before. They'd done quite well, but they tailed off towards the end of the game, towards the end of the season. But there were players who thought they were superstars, and the chairman had put, in my opinion, the manager in such a bad position with the players, and I go into it in great detail, that he played a massive part of John's going from being a bright. I signed for Chelsea the second time because of John Hollins, and I'll be honest with you, because of John Hollins. I had the utmost respect for him as a player. He's one of my favourite players. He was like Ray Lou. He gave everything 100% every time, and he was sold short by a chairman that put him in an unbelievable position that made him lose the players. And the plot is in the book. and I haven't held back. I haven't held back about, because it was heartbreaking to see. And there's an incident on my first day's training, which again is where I just looked in total disbelief of what I was watching.
I think you touched on this when we did the initial interview, and you said how I believe I'm right in saying when you went home, not to say you was doubting yourself, but you was like, "What on earth have I done here?" It was it when you say when you talked about the contrast from what it was from the 70s to the 80s, bearing in mind you were looking at about give or take 10 years.
Oh,
The culture, as you've mentioned it,
it was
changed massively.
it was unbelievable, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, but but football does change, people change, players change. But my God, it was an experience, but an experience, that probably came at the right time because when I had to retire, I sort of walked away from Stamford Bridge the second time, and the feeling, even though I retired, was nowhere near as emotional as the first time.
Hmm.
Nowhere near. Um, but yeah, it's funny because if people knew what was going on, and well, you'll read it in the book. You'll read it in the book. Um,
And
and I really haven't held back on that one.
I'm not going to give it away because again, by the book, but there is a very fascinating story that you've put into the book involving Ken Bates and Phil Collins. That's all I'm going to say on it, which we did
Yeah, yeah,
discuss as well on the show. Which again, I looked at
yeah.
it. I looked at the extracts this morning, and I know you've talked to me about it on a number of occasions, but when you're reading it and you're just thinking, "Wow, it's just incredible." Um,
Well, what upset me, it was Phil Collins and Bobby Moore.
mm,
And now, if Bobby Moore wanted to come into our football club or was promised tickets and the tickets weren't there for him to collect, surely if you take Bobby Moore up to your fans, the fans are going to be, it's Bobby Moore. This is fantastic. It's Phil Collins. Oh no. The Wolfman, as I called him, in his wolf coat, he read about it, but it was embarrassing. And then what he tried to do to me, after, oh, yeah,
mm.
you've got to read it. It's good
We'll
fun.
talk buy the book, definitely buy the book, but it's not a case of and the reason why I'm looking forward to reading the book. It's not a case whereby you've slagged off a lot of people. There's a lot of people that you've praised in the book, and you've mentioned that perhaps some people may have forgotten about because they've been unsung heroes. And I, from a Chelsea supporter that likes his history and appreciates it, hence the podcast, I would urge everyone to buy the book. Before we do let you go, Steve, there's just a couple of things on it. In terms of the book, will we potentially get another one? Will there
Well,
potentially be another book in the pipeline?
we're in talks with another one, which again, be now and then.
Brilliant.
And it's so there's talks in it, and
Brilliant.
but it it looks that way. I enjoyed it. The only thing I can't get used to is you wake up at 2 in the morning and something springs to mind, and I've got a notepad and a pen by my bed, and I write things down because to go back over the years and so many great memories. It was emotional, and what I
Of
wanted to
course,
do
yeah.
with the book is I gave it to a very good friend of mine to have a read, Rodney George. He's a great Chelsea fan, and he did the forwards and he wrote a lovely thing about the team. And he wrote it. And he said, 1 minute I'm crying. He said the next I'm laughing my head off.
Hmm.
He said there's every emotion in this book, and that's what I set out to do. And he loved it. His words were absolutely fantastic. He said he couldn't put it down. So that's a nice, because I know Rodney would be honest enough to say,
Yeah.
that's like
I
Jack
know
and Jill,
Rodney well,
or
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's good news.
Well, also, this is a free plug as well, but there's also an event happening at Chelsea at the centre called Under the Bridge, whereby you can actually meet Steve Wicks and purchase the book. There's also going to be like a Q&A event that's going to be happening. There
Yeah.
may be a few surprises in store in terms of potential former stars as well. Is there a
Yeah.
possibility you could perhaps mention that as well?
Yeah, on the 7th of June, we're doing a launch under the bridge. We're going to have the squad of players that are there that won promotion in 1977. 76, we're going to have a question and answer. Angie Brown is doing a singing her latest song, which is she's a great soul singer. And we're just going to have a good time, and we love you to be there. Please, the tickets are £45, but the book, if you buy your ticket, you get a free book and a poster, and by Paul Trevelyan. And so basically, the book is selling at £20. So the real cost of the ticket is you're paying £25, but you get a book. Because I was a little bit concerned about that, but it all works out, and it's good value, and it'd be a great night. And I'd love to see as many as those fans that of that time that love that time as met, and all the players are looking forward to it as well. And there's also a auction of memorabilia, which kindly people have donated, and that will be going back to the Chelsea Foundation for Dementia, as one of our squad members has just been diagnosed with it, and for him, we're doing that.
That's
So
brilliant.
we're going to have a great night. There's been a lot of thought. Yeah, and also there's food there and everything. So please come.
Well, definitely. And what we're going to
And I'll
do
see you.
as oh, I'll be there. Don't worry, Steve. I'll be there. No, in terms of the podcast itself, we will be promoting it. So once the book is released properly, we will obviously be the one. We'll be the one of the first to promote it on
Yeah,
our socials. We will also hopefully give you guys more information about the event that is going to be happening on June the 7th.
yeah.
I will certainly be there. Of course, I'll be there having a few beers with Steve, and we'll also be chatting all things Chelsea as well. But Steve, for, from myself to you, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the show. It's been really nice, to obviously,
It's nice
talk
to be.
about. It's been really nice to talk about your time as well, again with Chelsea, but also discussing the book. Because I remember when we first discussed it, you said if I was ever to write a book, people would be wanting to listen to it, so wanting to read it as well. But Steve, we will definitely stay in touch, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next month.
All right, mate. Cheers, Keith. Thank you.